Before the world existed, before humanity took its first breath, before time itself began its endless march, there was an angel, a being of unimaginable beauty, the brightest, the most magnificent, the closest to the throne of God. His name was Lucifer. Before the world of men, before the fall, before the first act of rebellion, there was only perfection, heaven, a kingdom of eternal harmony, untouched by sin, where divine light illuminated all things. In this celestial realm, nothing was left to chance. The heavens were not chaotic, but structured, operating under an unbreakable divine order. Each angelic being had a purpose, a role assigned by God Himself. The seraphim, known as the burning ones, were the highest order. They dwelled closest to the divine presence, their 6 wings veiling their faces as they sang without ceasing, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth is full of His glory." The cherubim, guardians of divine wisdom, whose very presence shielded the mysteries of the universe. They stood as protectors of sacred knowledge, ensuring that no impurity entered the holy places. The archangels, the messengers of God, wielding both wisdom and power, warriors of divine justice, their swords carried the authority of the Almighty. Among them, Michael and Gabriel would later become central figures in the cosmic battle that was yet to unfold. And at the pinnacle of all creation, above all other angels, stood one being unmatched in power and beauty, Lucifer, the morning star. He was not just another angel. He was the first of all created beings, the greatest among the heavenly hosts, the very masterpiece of God's creation. His voice commanded the songs of heaven, leading the angelic choirs in worship. His wisdom was beyond measure, his beauty so dazzling that even the stars paled in comparison. Lucifer was more than an angel. He was a living reflection of divine glory. But how? How does the most exalted angel fall so far? How does light itself become the prince of darkness? What truly led to his rebellion? And more importantly, what does it mean for us today? Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed. This is just the beginning of our deep dive into biblical mysteries. If you enjoy content like this, hit the like button. It helps spread this message to more people who need to hear it. What happened to Lucifer is more than just a story. It's a warning, a lesson written in eternity itself. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Then let's begin. To understand Lucifer's downfall, we must first witness his former glory. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Ezekiel 28:12. Among all the hosts of heaven, Lucifer was supreme. His form was handcrafted by God, adorned with every precious stone, onyx, jasper, sapphire, emerald. His garments radiated celestial fire. His wisdom was unparalleled, his voice a symphony of heaven, his presence inspired reverence and admiration. He stood nearest to the throne of God, leading the angelic choirs in worship. Lucifer was not merely another angel, he was the anointed cherub, the one chosen to dwell closest to God. Ezekiel 28:14. He walked among the fiery stones, the very essence of heaven's power, a being created to reflect the glory of the Almighty. No other angel possessed his splendor, no other angel carried his authority. If heaven had a prince, it would have been him. But even the brightest star can cast a shadow. He looks upon his own beauty, unrivaled, unmatched. He hears his own voice, commanding, powerful, awe-inspiring. He feels the respect of the angelic hosts, honoring him, admiring him. And then, a thought, barely a whisper, creeps into his mind. Who else in heaven is like me? His worship turns inward. His admiration for God shifts toward admiration for himself. For the first time, Lucifer does not desire to reflect God's glory. He begins to wonder what it would be like to have it for himself. It all started with a single thought, a whisper in his own mind that would change everything. Why should I serve when I could rule? Lucifer's light is dazzling. For eons he has reflected the glory of God, but now he begins to see it as his own. Am I not the morning star? Am I not the greatest of all angels? If I am the brightest, the wisest, the most exalted, why do I bow? The throne of God radiated an unapproachable light, a brilliance so intense that none could gaze upon it without trembling in awe. The angelic hosts moved in perfect harmony, their praises filling the heavens like an eternal symphony. The air shimmered with divine presence, and all who dwelled in heaven rejoiced in unbroken adoration. All except one. Lucifer stood apart. His wings, once lifted high in exultation, now rested lower. His voice, once the greatest among heaven's worshippers, was silent. He did not sing, he did not bow. He only watched. Gabriel noticed. The archangel approached, his steps firm, his gaze steady. He had seen something in Lucifer, something shifting, something unsettled. Though heaven remained unchanged, Lucifer had begun to move differently, to think differently. Gabriel could not ignore it. He studied his brother carefully, then spoke. Why did Lucifer seem so troubled? Lucifer's expression remained unreadable, his gaze fixed on the brilliance of the throne. He hesitated, as if weighing his words. Then his lips curled into a smooth, knowing smile. Troubled? No, dear Gabriel, he said at last, his voice steady, almost amused. I am only pondering. Gabriel tilted his head slightly. There was something beneath the words, something unspoken, something veiled. Pondering what? Lucifer exhaled, his gaze drifting beyond the throne of God, past the realms of light, past the legions of angels, past the very fabric of creation itself. His voice, though quiet, carried weight. Perhaps there is more for us than we have been told. Gabriel stiffened. His expression, once gentle, hardened slightly. More? The word rang in his mind like a discordant note among heaven's perfect harmony. He had never questioned, never wondered beyond what was given. Why would Lucifer? What could be greater than standing in the presence of the Almighty? For the briefest moment, something flickered in Lucifer's eyes. It passed so quickly that Gabriel could not name it, but it left a shadow between them. Then Lucifer's smile returned, smooth as ever, but now measured, controlled. Perhaps you are right, my friend. He reached out, placing a hand on Gabriel's shoulder in reassurance. But as he turned to walk away, something changed. His expression darkened. The light around him, once effortless, felt heavier. Gabriel watched him go, an unease settling deep within him. Something was stirring. Something was wrong. Time passed, and the change in Lucifer became undeniable. The angels sensed it. They felt it. Where he once led, he now lingered on the edges. Where he once lifted his hands in praise, he now kept them at his sides. His movements, once graceful and effortless, were slower, more deliberate. Some among the heavenly host grew uneasy. They whispered in hushed tones, sensing a shift they could not name. Others admired him all the more. He was strong. He was wise. He was exalted above all others. Perhaps, they thought, he was destined for something greater. But Lucifer no longer stood in the center of worship. Instead, he watched, observed, calculated. He withdrew. Far from the chorus of heaven, he found himself alone. A flowing stream of divine water shimmered before him, its surface like liquid light. He gazed into it, watching his own reflection ripple and waver. His image was breathtaking, flawless, powerful. Lifting a hand, he watched as the light bent around him, refracting through his form like a prism. A small smile played on his lips. I was made in perfection. His fingers flexed, as if testing the weight of his own power. My light is unmatched. His wings unfurled slightly, golden feathers catching the glow of heaven's brilliance. "My wisdom surpasses all." His head tilted, eyes narrowing. What if I was meant for more? A sudden gust of wind brushed past him. He shivered. For a moment he felt something cold. A warning, a whisper. He turned sharply, scanning the heavens. Nothing, only silence. Yet in his heart the fire grew. Lucifer's pride was growing, but what pushed him to openly defy God? Keep watching as we uncover the shocking revelation that shattered heaven's peace. Lucifer stood before a gathering of angels. His voice, once purely devoted to worship, now carried something different, something persuasive, something commanding. His eyes burned with newfound determination. He was no longer questioning, he was planning. And then God revealed a plan that would shake the heavens to their core. The throne room of heaven stretched beyond the limits of comprehension, a realm of unimaginable splendor where even the highest of angels could only glimpse the brilliance of the Almighty. Pure, overwhelming light filled the space, illuminating the celestial host with an eternal radiance. The very air vibrated with divine power, an unseen force holding all creation together. The angelic legions stood in their ranks, their forms glowing like living fire. The seraphim hovered above, their 6 wings covering their faces in reverence. The cherubim knelt low, their mighty forms trembling before the throne. The archangels stood ready, their expressions filled with anticipation. Something was about to be revealed, something no eye had seen, no mind had conceived. The heavens grew silent. Then the voice of the Almighty resounded, a voice that had spoken worlds into existence. "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness." Genesis 1:26. A shockwave of awe rippled through the celestial realm, a new creation, a being formed not merely from divine will, but in the image of God Himself, a reflection of His nature, a declaration of His love. The realization swept through the heavens like fire, and at once the angels erupted in joyous praise. Their voices rose in anthems of wonder, filling the expanse of eternity with their song. The seraphim cried out, their wings trembling with devotion. The multitudes fell before the throne, exalting the Creator for His glorious plan. But amidst the rejoicing, one figure remained still. One voice did not rise in worship. Lucifer, the morning star, the most radiant of them all. His hands, once lifted in adoration, now curled into fists. His eyes remained fixed on the throne, but they did not shine with reverence. They burned with something else, something dark, something dangerous. Within him, a storm was brewing. Lucifer did not rejoice. The celebration began to fade. A divine presence filled the space, deeper, heavier, as if heaven itself was holding its breath. The angels knelt low, their wings folding in solemn reverence. They had heard of creation before, but now God was about to reveal something greater, something that would shake the very foundations of eternity. Once more, the Almighty spoke. "I will become one of them. My Son will take human form, and you shall worship him." The heavens trembled. For the first time in the history of creation, the celestial hosts were struck silent. Even the highest archangels, those who commanded the legions of heaven, lowered their heads. The celestial flames of the seraphim flickered with reverence. The mighty cherubim covered their eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of the revelation. God Himself, stepping into the very creation He had made, taking on the form of flesh, becoming mortal. It was beyond comprehension, beyond understanding, but what was unfathomable to the angels was unquestioned in their obedience. One by one, they bowed, they worshipped, they trusted the divine wisdom of the Almighty. All except one. Lucifer remained standing, His wings trembled, but not in awe. His hands tightened into fists, his expression twisted. Something in him was breaking. Something in him was shattering. The light of heaven, once so comforting, now seemed unbearably bright. The weight of worship around him became suffocating. And then, as if it could no longer be contained, the storm within him broke. The silence was shattered. Gasps rippled through the celestial ranks. Heads turned toward the morning star, their gazes filled with shock. For the first time, defiance had entered heaven, and it came from the brightest among them. No, Lucifer's voice was not loud at first, but it carried through the heavens like the distant rumble of a coming storm. Then it rose, shaking, furious, unrelenting. I will not bow to flesh. His voice, once the most beautiful among the angelic host, now rang with rebellion. It was sharp as a blade, piercing through the order of eternity itself. The kneeling angels looked up, their faces frozen in disbelief. Never before had such words been spoken. Never before had such defiance been heard. Lucifer stepped forward, his breath heavy, his golden radiance flickering, distorting under the weight of his pride. His wings unfurled, commanding attention. He was no longer addressing the angelic host. He was speaking directly to the throne. We were the first, the highest, the most glorious of all your creation. His voice seethed, filled with bitter disbelief. And now, you make these weak, fragile creatures in your image, and you expect us, he gestured toward the legions of angels, to bow to them? The murmurs began. A ripple of uncertainty spread through the multitudes. Some angels exchanged uncertain glances. Some averted their eyes, unwilling to witness the scene unfolding. But a few, just a few, began to nod. Something within them resonated with Lucifer's words. Lucifer saw it, and for the first time he felt it. Power. Not the power given to him by God. Something else. Something self-made. Lucifer had spoken the words aloud. He had crossed the line. There was no going back. His wings lowered, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with rage and something more. Conviction. This was no longer doubt. This was no longer hesitation. This was a decision. He breathed in slowly, his heart pounding, and then he spoke again. His voice now calm, too assured. No more. The heavens held their breath. The seraphim whispered among themselves. Gabriel stepped forward, his expression unreadable, but his eyes darkened with sorrow. Michael's hand tightened on his sword, and the Almighty remained silent. His light did not waver. His throne did not move. Lucifer lifted his chin. He knew what came next. He had already chosen. And so, the most beautiful angel prepared for war against his own creator. Lucifer's expression hardened. His mind raced now, weaving the threads of rebellion. He would not be alone. He knew there were others who wondered, others who questioned. And he would find them. He would gather them. And when the time came, he would rise. In the vast celestial expanse of heaven, where light once reigned without shadow, a shift had begun. In the sacred corridors that had always pulsed with divine radiance, something darker stirred. The glow of the Almighty's throne still burned in the distance, yet here, in this place, it felt muted, distant, as if heaven itself mourned what was about to unfold. Gathered in the gloom stood a host of angels. They were the highest, the strongest, the most revered among heaven's legions. And yet they stood in silence, their gazes uncertain, their wings drawn close as if shielding themselves from the weight of what they had come to hear. At their center stood one figure, Lucifer. He towered over them, his presence commanding, his vast wings half spread. Even now his radiance was breathtaking, yet something had changed. The light that once shone effortlessly from within him now flickered, tainted by something unseen. He did not plead, He did not ask, he commanded. "We are the highest of all creation." His voice rolled like an approaching storm. "The firstborn of the heavens, the most radiant among God's hosts. Why then? Why should we serve dust?" A murmur rippled through the gathering. Doubt, subtle as a whisper, began to take root. Some nodded slightly, others shifted, uneasy. Lucifer pressed forward, his wings extending as if he would claim something beyond what had been given. "We were made in perfection. We have walked among the stones of fire. We have led the worship of the Almighty, and now we are asked to kneel before these weak, frail creatures, these mortals? Flesh and blood? No, no more." The murmurs grew louder, uncertainty swelling within the ranks. Some angels looked to one another, their faces marked by confusion, conflict, but then a single voice broke through the hesitation. "But if he has decreed it, then it must be right." Lucifer turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Must it?" His voice was quieter now, yet laced with an undeniable power. "Tell me, do you not feel it? That gnawing doubt? That whisper of truth? We were made higher. We were made glorious. Should we not be the ones to rule?" The hesitant angel lowered his gaze. Others exchanged glances, and Lucifer saw it, uncertainty spreading like wildfire. He had them now. He stepped forward, his voice turning soft, almost hypnotic. "Why should we serve when we were meant to rule?" The words hung in the air. A shiver moved through the assembly. Then, slowly, one angel knelt, not in submission, but in allegiance. Then another, and another, and another. Lucifer's lips curled into a triumphant smile. The rebellion had begun. Beyond the gathering of rebels, the throne room of heaven burned with celestial brilliance. The presence of the Almighty was unshaken, unwavering. Yet, in the wake of treason, the air itself felt heavier, charged with the weight of what was coming. The host of heaven stood divided. At the forefront of those who remained loyal stood Michael, the warrior of God, the defender of divine order. His armor gleamed with an ethereal glow, his sword, a blade of unrelenting fire, held firm in his grasp. His wings stretched wide, his stance unyielding. He had seen the whispers turn to action. He had seen the deception take hold, and now his voice rose like a thunderclap that shattered the silence of eternity. "Who is like God?" The words struck like lightning, shaking the very foundation of heaven. The angels behind him stood taller, their resolve unshaken. There was no more hesitation, there was no more doubt, only war. From the opposing ranks, Lucifer stepped forward, his own weapon formed in his grasp, dark, pulsing, wreathed in unnatural energy. He smirked, his tone laced with mocking arrogance. "If the throne will not be given, then it shall be taken." Michael's grip tightened on his sword. The fire along its edge roared to life. This was the final moment of peace. And then it was gone. Heaven erupted. The once peaceful expanse shattered into chaos as the forces of light and darkness collided. The clash of celestial steel rang through the heavens, each strike shaking the very fabric of creation. Streaks of divine fire and corrupted energy tore across the battlefield, rending the sky as the armies of heaven waged war. Lucifer fought like a storm unleashed. His movements were fluid, devastating. His blade, wreathed in darkness, cut through the ranks of the loyal, his fury driving him forward like an unrelenting tide. His rebels fought beside him, their twisted lights now weapons of defiance. Michael met him in the center of the chaos. Their blades clashed, sending shockwaves rippling through the heavens. The very sky bent under their power. Lucifer snarled, his strength undeniable, his rage unmatched. But Michael did not yield. Angel fought against angel, brother against brother. The sky became a storm of war, a maelstrom of light and shadow, shaking the very core of creation itself. The tide turned, the rebels faltered. For all their power they had been fueled by pride and ambition, and neither could stand against the unshakable justice of heaven. Michael fought with unwavering resolve, his sword cutting through the last defenses of the fallen. Lucifer staggered back, his breath ragged, his once glorious form now marred by battle. His wings, torn and blackened, trembled under the weight of defeat. He lifted his gaze, burning, defiant, filled with hatred. "You think you have won?" His voice was raw, seething, broken. "This war is not over." Michael did not gloat, he did not waver. He simply lifted his sword, his expression sorrowful but resolute. "It is over." The blade ignited with divine power, and Lucifer was cast down. The heavens roared with the sound of his fall. His light, once the most brilliant of all, trailed like a dying star, swallowed by the abyss. His screams echoed through the void. Then, silence. Lucifer had lost the war, but his battle against God was far from over. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe, because the next part of this story is crucial. What happens next will shape all of human history. From the ashes of defeat, Lucifer would rise again, but this time not as an angel, but as Satan. "If I cannot rule heaven, I will rule earth." Lucifer's wings spread wide as he gazes upon the throne of God, his once beautiful form now twisted by arrogance. Angels surround him, their faces sorrowful. A great war is about to begin, one that will change eternity. This was the thought that sealed Lucifer's fate. Lucifer was not created as an enemy of God. He was the most glorious of all angels, described in Isaiah 14:12 as the morning star, and in Ezekiel 28:14 as the anointed cherub who covers. He walked among the fiery stones of heaven, covered in dazzling jewels, his voice like a choir of instruments. Wisdom and beauty adorned him, and God had placed him in a high position of honor. But this honor was not enough. A dark thought took root in his heart. "I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High." Isaiah 14, verse 13-14. His pride turned to rebellion, and rebellion turned to war. The book of Revelation 12, verse 7-9 describes a celestial battle. Michael, the archangel, leading the faithful angels against Lucifer and his followers. Swords of light clashed against darkness. Angelic voices cried out as heaven trembled. But no matter how fierce Lucifer fought, he could not prevail against the power of God. Then came the great fall. Like a streak of lightning, Lucifer was cast down to the earth, his wings scorched, his form darkened. No longer the bearer of light, he became Satan, the adversary, the deceiver, the prince of this world. But Satan's war against God was not over. He had lost heaven, but he had set his sights on a new battlefield, the earth. Satan's revenge against God did not come through brute force. It came through a whisper. It was here, in the heart of innocence, that Satan struck. Taking the form of a serpent, he slithered toward Eve, his voice smooth, his words dripping with deceit. "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" Genesis 3, verse 1. A seed of doubt was planted. Eve hesitated, and then came the lie that changed the world forever. "You will not surely die. You will be like God, knowing good and evil." Genesis 3, verse 4-5. The fruit was plucked, the bite was taken, and with that single act the world fell. Sin had entered creation. A rift had formed between man and God. Satan had won his first victory. But he was far from finished. With sin came pain, suffering, and death, and Satan wasted no time in accelerating the corruption of humanity. Satan whispered into the heart of Cain, filling him with envy and rage. God had accepted Abel's offering, but rejected his. The bitterness grew until it turned into something deadly. Why should he be favored over me? Cain's hands trembled as he struck down his brother, marking the first murder in history. Genesis 4, verse 6 to 8. A new chapter in Satan's deception had begun, turning man against man. As generations passed, Satan's influence spread like a disease. Humanity descended deeper into darkness, embracing evil and rejecting God. Every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. Genesis 6, verse 5. The world was filled with violence, corruption, and unspeakable sins. It seemed as though Satan had won. But God, grieved at the depths of human wickedness, sent a great flood to cleanse the earth. Satan had succeeded in leading mankind astray, but he had not destroyed God's plan. But Lucifer's plans go far beyond tempting individuals. His ultimate goal is global deception. The war that began in heaven and corrupted the first humans is not over. It continues in every generation, in every heart, in every nation. The battle for souls rages on. The battle is not over. What started in Eden continues today. Satan's influence is seen in every temptation, every lie, every act of evil in the world. But his story does not end in victory, because one day the war he started will come to an end. His plan is simple: turn the world against God. Lucifer, once the most radiant of all God's creation, now the prince of darkness, has spent millennia waging war against heaven. Through deception, corruption, and destruction, he has led countless souls away from their Creator. But his greatest battle is yet to come. Revelation's prophecy unveils the final chapter of his rebellion. The end of days will bring his last, desperate attempt to seize power, but it will also bring his ultimate defeat. But in the end times, his deception will reach its peak. The book of Revelation 13 describes the rise of the beast, a powerful world leader who will be empowered by Satan himself. Through false miracles, deception, and terror, he will unite the nations under his rule, demanding worship and absolute allegiance. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast, and all who dwell on the earth will worship him. Revelation 13, verse 3 to 8. This will not be a rule of peace, but a reign of terror. Those who refuse to bow will face persecution. A mark, the mark of the beast, will be enforced, controlling who can buy, sell, or live freely. Lucifer's plan is clear: create a world where God is rejected and evil reigns. He will turn humanity against their Creator, setting the stage for the ultimate confrontation between darkness and light. But this false kingdom will not stand forever. Revelation speaks of this final war, the moment where Satan and his followers will make their last stand against God. They will gather for battle on the great day of God Almighty. Then I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to wage war against the rider on the horse and his army. Revelation 16:14. This is the battle of Armageddon, Satan's ultimate attempt to overthrow heaven's dominion, but it will be a battle he cannot win. Satan's forces, vast as they are powerless against the judgment of God. Fire came down from heaven and consumed them. Revelation 20, verse 9. What began as a rebellion in heaven will end in fire and finality. Lucifer, once the mightiest of all angels, now stands condemned. Revelation 20:10 declares his fate, and the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. This is not merely defeat. This is eternal punishment. There will be no escape, no second chances, no more deception. The prince of darkness, who once sought to rule both heaven and earth, will be cast into eternal fire, never to rise again. But though his time is running out, Satan's war against humanity continues every day. Until the final judgment, Satan works tirelessly, tempting, deceiving, and leading many astray. The battle between good and evil is not just a prophecy of the future, it is happening now. Every decision, every belief, every soul is a part of this war. The question remains, whose side will you be on? The end is written. The final battle will come, and Satan will lose. But until that day, the battle for souls continues. Will you be deceived? Or will you stand with the one who will reign forever? Lucifer's story is not just an ancient tragedy. It is a warning for all of us. Once the most beautiful and powerful angel, he fell from grace because he sought to elevate himself above God. His desire for power led to his destruction. And yet the lesson remains. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. James 4:6. The same battle that played out in heaven now plays out on earth. Pride blinds, deception lures, but humility and faith lead to salvation. The question is, where do you stand? Will you follow the light, or will you be swept away by deception? Satan's influence is real. His tactics are subtle. But no matter how great his schemes, his defeat is already written. The war may rage on, but the victory has already been secured, and it belongs to God. If you found this story eye-opening, hit the like button and subscribe for more biblical deep dives. Every video unravels the hidden battles, the unseen war, and the eternal truths of Scripture. This is more than just a story. It's a call to be vigilant, to seek truth, and to stand firm in faith. What do you think? Will Satan deceive the world before the end times? Share your thoughts in the comments section. This isn't just history, it's happening now. The battle for truth is unfolding in our world, in our culture, and in our hearts. How do you see deception taking shape today? What are the signs that stand out to you? Let's discuss in the comments. Your voice matters.